Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. Let's take a look at the headlines. Now, Israel's military says 5 terrorists who hid inside a mosque in the West Bank were killed in an operation. Palestinian group Islamic Jihad confirms the killing of its top commander. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan holds talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing after Chinese military warned Washington to stop collusion with Taiwan. Hong Kong court finds 2 editors of the now defunct pro-democracy Stand News media outlet guilty of sedition, drawing global scrutiny amid a security crackdown. Typhoon Shanshan, the strongest of the year, makes landfall in Japan's southwest, bringing torrential rain and strong winds. Authorities warn of life-threatening flooding and landslides. And Spain signs agreements with Mauritania and Gambia to curb illegal migration as Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez visits West Africa. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest on Mpox outbreak in Africa. The continent is on the front line of the fight against the viral infection. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says it is close to securing 1 million Mpox vaccine doses. Africa CDC estimated that the continent needs 10 million doses, with the Democratic Republic of Congo being the most in need. The African Union's health watchdog has also urged manufacturers to share the vaccine-making technology to battle the disease. Several countries have assured vaccines to African countries hit by outbreaks. Spain is the latest to pledge 500,000 doses. Germany will also be sending 100,000 doses to East Africa. Now, on Thursday, a first batch of Mpox jabs arrived on African soil amid the current outbreak. Nigeria received 10,000 doses of the vaccine from the United States. The country began the process to secure the vaccines well before it was declared a global health emergency by the World Health Organization last month. Nigeria has confirmed 40 Mpox cases this year, but says that the true number could be more than 700. The West African nation has not recorded any deaths from the virus. It has also not recorded any cases of the clade 1b, which is the new variant detected in the Democratic Republic of Congo that has spread to neighboring countries. The DRC has borne the brunt of the epidemic, with 90% of cases reported this year. Burundi, Rwanda, Kenya and Uganda have also been affected. Over 22,000 suspected Mpox cases and 622 deaths have been reported in Africa this year. The viral disease is transmitted from animals to humans and can also be passed from human to human, causing fever, muscle pain and skin lesions. Now, the World Health Organization says that more research is needed to understand how the outbreak is spreading. It said that droplets were a minor route of transmission compared to physical contact.
Mpox is evolving rapidly. The fact that clade 2b evolved over a period of 5 years to a new strain, and now we are having clade 1 evolving rapidly to a new strain. We are not too sure what new strain will emerge in future and the implication of such new strains.
The Africa CDC says the continent needs around $245 million for the Mpox response and for resources needed to mobilize. However, Africa has secured less than 10% of the estimated amount. The continent is increasingly under pressure to curb an outbreak of the deadly infection.
We are still working blindly in Africa. We don't have the required knowledge about Mpox, natural history, transmission dynamics, risk factors of Mpox, and essentially you need to understand your context. You need to understand your disease for you to develop or design preventive strategies against such a disease. And that's a significant limitation, and that tells us that we need to invest in uncovering, understanding our disease better.
There are still no Mpox-specific vaccines, but smallpox vaccines have worked against the infection. These vaccines, manufactured by two pharmaceutical companies, Denmark's Bavarian Nordic and Japan's KM Biologics. Critics say the process of getting vaccines to Africa has been slow, with the WHO's regulatory process posing a major challenge. You see, most of the African nations rely on the WHO to know which medication is safe and effective. But 2 years on since the last Mpox outbreak, the WHO has not officially approved the two vaccines. The global health body says it does not have the data that it requires to do a complete review. Now it has asked vaccine manufacturers to register their interest in receiving an emergency license for the Mpox vaccines. This would allow the World Health Organization to fast-track its approvals. Regulatory delays will only worsen the situation in Africa. Mpox cases are rapidly rising, with some countries reporting cases for the first time. Africa CDC says the infections had jumped 200% in the last week. Medical experts in Africa say the current outbreak is largely a result of years of neglect and the global community's inability to stop sporadic epidemics among a population with little immunity against the disease. Can the world come together to help Africa fight the outbreak? Now for more, we have with us Michael Gau, who's an emergency care specialist and infection prevention control expert. He joins us live from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, how effective have the current public health measures and vaccination campaigns been in controlling the spread of Mpox? And what are the concerns surrounding the Mpox strain that seems to be mutating fast?
Thank you very much for the question. Just like any other emergent disease, and more so these outbreaks, some points they find us that we are not well prepared, and not only in Africa, even globally. So there's those key strategies that any government or any institution ought to put across or to have them ready. And some of the key strategies, one is for having the early detection, and this is detecting early by testing and also your diagnosis, because again, there is a very big misconception that these symptoms, because some patients are asymptomatic and others they could exhibit a few symptoms. So the early detection is key. That is one of the key strategies. And now meaning you also strategize where you increase the facilities for testing. Then should you get now a case that is now a suspected case. And more, if I give a reference with the Kenya, is that we have had more than 250 patient suspected cases. Now, these, remember, they have not already been confirmed. So that means it's from the entry point at the border post. So when they are picked from there, this is now where they are isolated. Then there is a testing. After now, we get to test these patients with there's a confirmed case. Now, the next procedure is a contact tracing, because again, if we don't trace these who are already infected, that goes back to the community. And that means that the transmissibility level increases, And as you increase, that means even there is going to be resistance, and more so even where we're discussing now, we have inadequacy of vaccine. Then finally, then the other strategy is to have the post-exposure vaccines. And now this is where the elephant in the room is, because as you have mentioned previously, that we do not have enough vaccine yet. So there's a lot that has been requested, a lot of vaccines has been requested, because if you look in population-wise in the whole of Africa, we are more than 1.5 billion. So you require a lot to vaccinate and overcome these. So those are some of the key strategies.
Absolutely,
that,
Michael.
Yes, I could talk of.
Yeah, we'll get back to the availability of vaccines. But first, what are the potential economic and social impacts of the Mpox outbreak on the affected regions? And what steps can be taken to mitigate the effects?
Okay, another good question. So I'll start off with the social impact. One of the social impact is the case of the public health strain, because now as medical facilities, or including the healthcare providers, perhaps we don't have proper trainings, and mostly the limited resources settings that we perhaps know you're finding that the team that is already trained to avert or address these patients, then again it gets strained because again we don't have many people who are trained. That would be the one. The other point is social impact is a social stigma. I've had some patients who get infected that they are getting isolated because of just the presentation of the disease. It's really, really a big problem. And the other thing you're looking at with that isolation, there is a lot of mental health or the mental well-being for both healthcare providers or the community health providers, and including the patient themselves, so because of the isolation. The other effect we find also can be affected is the school, so the education, because some point we don't have enough medical facilities for isolation. So you find some countries, they're using schools as isolation sections or places. That means then the schools will be closed, and that is affecting the education side. That's pretty much in a nutshell. I'll talk of I'll look into the social aspect. As a point of the economic impact is the healthcare cost. So you do realize we don't have a specific treatment. So you are treating this patient in respect as they showcase the symptoms. So there is a little burden into the healthcare cost, because you remember, again, we still have other diseases that are still ongoing. The other thing, you're looking at the workforce and the workforce productivity, because again, we look at the training. How many people are trained to respond to the infectious diseases, more so like the case of Mpox? Do they have the right PPEs on how to address this? If the patient cannot come to the hospital, do they have the capability to go and evacuate them from homes and bring them to the medical facilities? Another thing is we have realized, we learned even with the COVID, is the tourism and trade. Because right now there's a lot of screening, even the border posts. So any entry, there is a limited, there's an incident that you do not have to do a unnecessary travel, unless it is absolute. So that also affects now trade, and again, some countries benefit more with the tourism. And finally, you're looking at the case of the supply chain as well. So if you close the airline, definitely we're not going to be able to be moving the drugs, and especially the case of the vaccines. Then perhaps the final on a mitigation measure.
Yes, Michael, on that, let me just interrupt you. Right, on the vaccines, countries like Japan, as an example, and Germany and the US, as well as Spain, all sending vaccines to Africa, or promising to send vaccines. How can international cooperation and support be improved to better address and prevent future Mpox outbreaks, and especially in resource-limited settings?
In international collaboration, I'm looking at the sharing of resources. Perhaps the research, one of the key things you're looking at, the research and development. We may not have enough, or to cater as a resource part or the expert in research and development. Now we could have that as an exchange program. The other thing is the data sharing and the surveillance of those diseases, which means we ought to be sharing international organization where we can share with the African connect these diseases, and then more so then be able to track it. The other thing you're looking at is coming up with the policies and advocacy. And this is just to help globally, because this is not just an African problem, it is a global problem. And more so again, to aid on the same, we are finding the case of finance and the logistics. So you're finding we ought, because the settings, we find that we don't have proper funding on imagining diseases like this. So then international organization can come on board. Then we have a funding. So in case that these measures of the diseases that come about, is just run in there and come out, and we start executing so that we are able to reach more. We are more of preventative than more of reactive, because that's the biggest problem that we are finding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Michael, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa. Your time is appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Shifting focus to South Africa, pressure is building on President Cyril Ramaphosa to sack the Justice Minister. South Africa's Justice Minister Thembi Simelane is under scrutiny for a graft scandal linked to what is known as the country's great bank heist. Now, President Ramaphosa has asked the minister to explain the graft allegations linking her to a $130 million bank scandal that has triggered calls for her to step down. South African media reports suggest Simelane allegedly received an improper loan of over $28,000 while she was serving as the mayor of Polokwane, the capital city of the northeastern Limpopo province, between 2014 and 2021. Reports linked to the payment to a fraud scandal at the now defunct VBS Mutual Bank. The bank collapsed in 2018 after the South African Reserve Bank had found evidence of wide-scale looting, fraud and corruption. The bank's owners were accused of bribing local officials in some of South Africa's poorest and most dysfunctional municipalities, persuading them to divert their budgets into VBS's coffers in return for cash and gifts. Many customers who were mainly poor rural depositors and pensioners lost their savings in the scandal. President Ramaphosa has requested a detailed report and a briefing from the minister on the matter. Several political parties have called for Simelane to resign and a swift probe into the allegations. This includes the leftist opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, and concerns are also raised by the ruling coalition member, Democratic Alliance, or the DA. 51-year-old Thembi Simelane was appointed in June after the African National Congress, the ANC, was forced to form a government of national unity with the DA and other smaller parties. ANC lost its absolute parliamentary majority for the first time in 30 years in the May elections. A major reason seen behind the sharp drop in support for the ANC is its failure to address corruption. High-ranking officials within the party have been involved in numerous graft scandals, and this includes President Cyril Ramaphosa and his deputy, as well as the country's former National Assembly Speaker. The latest allegations on the Justice Minister come as a fresh taint, while the ANC tries to revive its battered image. And shifting focus to Ethiopia now. Ethiopian Airlines, which is Africa's largest carrier, has been forced to lease planes after delayed deliveries by the aerospace firm Boeing. Ethiopian Airlines has turned to leasing companies to source its fleet as it has sought to maintain its expansion plans despite aircraft delivery delays from Boeing. The airline said it has been waiting for new 737 MAX passenger jets and 777 freight aircraft from Boeing since April. It is now expecting the 777Fs in September, but Boeing is yet to be providing a new schedule for delivery of the 737 MAX jets. Now, the Ethiopian Airlines CEO said that the late deliveries will affect their growth plan, and thus they are leasing aeroplanes from the leasing market. The CEO added that he hoped that Boeing would address the issues and that it would not affect the strong ties between the two companies. Over half of Ethiopian Airlines' fleet comprises Boeing models. The aerospace company is currently navigating one of its toughest periods. It is experiencing delivery delays due to ongoing part shortages and workforce turnover, which have persisted since the COVID-19 pandemic. Adding to the challenges is the strike risk that the company is facing. Boeing and its largest union are at odds over issues like wages and job security that could potentially shut down its Seattle area factories next month. And several airlines have raised concerns about Boeing's delayed aircraft deliveries. Despite the challenges, Ethiopian Airlines has maintained its commitment to Boeing. Last year, the airline announced orders for 11 Boeing 787 Dreamliners and 20 Boeing 737 MAX aeroplanes as a part of its fleet modernization strategy. Boeing is also set to open a new office in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa in October, aiming to boost collaboration for joint production of aircraft components. Ethiopian Airlines is also reportedly pursuing further expansion across Africa. It has expanded its international network with new routes and has increased frequencies on several existing routes. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our story today is from Sudan. The 16-month-long war between the army and the paramilitary RSF has destroyed several houses, but it has failed to dash the hopes of millions of Sudanese who are ready to rebuild their homes and their livelihoods. Many displaced people in North Sudan have turned to traditional materials like clay and mud to build their new homes while they wait for peace to return to their homeland. Our next report tells you more about it.
They say home is where the peace is. Home is not a place, but a feeling of belongingness, love and hope. The people of Sudan are proving this notion. More than a year of brutal civil war in the nation has destroyed houses and shattered buildings. But it hasn't shattered the will and the optimism of the millions of people who are ready to build everything from scratch. 16 months of brutal fighting between the army and the paramilitary RSF has displaced over 10 million people. The crisis has been labelled as one of the world's worst. The United Nations says Sudan is at a breaking point. But the Sudanese people are ready to put it all together. Displaced people in North Sudan are building new homes. Unsure of when they would be able to return to their life before, they are looking for a fresh start. It's a bit traditional with no modern material available. So people have turned to clay, mud and palm fronds to build new houses. But for now, these materials have emerged as saviors, providing them better conditions and an escape from the bloody war.
We use these specific materials in construction to save time, but also because of the war edition conditions and situation we are living in. We built the house in the traditional way with clay and palm fronds.
The war displaced Mohammed Abd al-Hamid from Khartoum, and he hopes every day for the situation in his country to improve and for him to return to the capital. But until then, he is assembling a new life brick by brick.
Every day we say there is hope for the situation to improve and for us to return to Khartoum, but the situation still looks the same. I decided to build here on a plot of land that I own. I started building with local raw materials such as clay and bricks. Thank God, I built the house, but the roof still remains. Step by step, I will build the roof and move to the new house.
The traditional materials that people are using are easily accessible. Besides, some people are also skilled in construction work.
The materials used are easy to obtain. They're all from the local market and are not imported. Clay is available and the animals are available here. And construction workers here have experience in this method because they inherited it from their ancestors.
Almost 20% of the Sudanese population has fled homes amid the war. There is a huge shortage of food and water, creating famine-like conditions. Efforts to bring a truce have failed so far. US-led peace talks have concluded in Geneva with no deal. Sudan's army chief has ruled out participation in the peace talks as he accuses the RSF of continued attacks on civilian areas.
Most people here do not understand the reason behind the war and why it broke out. The reasons for the war are very weak and may be illogical. But in any case, we are simple people and have nothing to do with the war.
With an agreement to end the war not in sight, people in Sudan have realized that returning to normalcy could be a distant dream. So instead, they are choosing to embrace the new normal. A truce deal might not be in their hands, but the spirit to fight the odds and the will to survive certainly is.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Hello and a very warm welcome. I am Gasheen Garland and you're watching Firstpost. In the next few